What if the Army had a unit capable of destroying nuclear-armed ICBMs in space before they reached our homeland?
What if the Army had a brigade solely dedicated to integrating friendly and interdicting adversary space capabilities?
What if the Army had an organization envisioning and experimenting with space, air, and missile defense technology before our adversaries?
What if the Army had an organization producing space and missile defense professionals while planning future force requirements for 2030 and beyond?
What if there were a team of experts under one command who help integrate the Army's air and missile defense enterprise to deter adversaries, assure allies and partners, and defend our interests around the world?
What if the Army had a unit with soldiers who have actually been to space?
We have liftoff.
And what if all these organizations create the best place to work in the Army?
What if?
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 What if
There is.
Awesome. And what a great honor it is to be commanding that What If unit, because it is a unit. It's the Army Space and Missile Defense Command. So thanks to AUSA for this opportunity to talk about the advantages that this U.S. Army Space and Missile Defense Command is providing to our force to gain advantage in the space realm. So before we jump into all of the speakers, first I want to frame SMDC, what we do, and a little bit more about it. Hopefully the video help you understand a little bit more about Space and Missile Defense Command. But Space Missile Command is the Army Service Component Command for 3 COCOMs. STRATCOM, NORTHCOM with our GMD mission, and SPACECOM with our assigned space forces via the 1st Space Brigade. Also within the command, we have several elements in the command that allow us to really challenge the what if theme that we highlighted on the screen. We have a tech center that leverages S&T to get after the latest and greatest technology in space and to eventually produce prototypes. We have a center of excellence with a Army capability manager that can then take capability prototypes, if necessary, go to programs of record. If not, still field it with our forces. And then we have a tactical unit, 1st Space Brigade, that takes those prototypes or programs of records and employ it across the force to really understand, help us to move faster, and help us to grow in our space capabilities. So those are some of the few areas of the command that I wanted to highlight as we dive into this, give you a familiarization of what SMDC is, what SMDC does, and now we're going to jump into a little bit more detail of realizing the space division. So as I look at the priorities within the command as we move forward, you know, probably our top priority is how do we deliver that capability responsive to the warfighter? How do we continue to get after more tactical solutions that allows our soldiers to maneuver around on the battlefield, different areas, different times, smaller weight platforms. Also, in SMDC, priority is how do we build the expertise within our soldiers so that we're not borrowing manpower. Right now, we pull from military intelligence, signal corps, air defense, and then invest in the training of those soldiers and then release them back to their basic branch, where we're looking to challenge that model and come up with a better business model of growing MOS within space so you're able to build and invest in our non-commissioned officers, warrant officers, and build a professional branch moving forward. So those are some of the things we're getting after within Space and Missile Defense Branch. Now I'd like to pass it to Pete Atkinson from the Army G3 Space Division.
Thanks so much, sir. I'm Colonel Pete Atkinson with Headquarters Department of the Army, a G3 Space Team. I want to highlight just a few things we're doing. Can everybody hear me? Perfect. Okay. I want to make sure everybody's tracking. In January of this year, the Secretary of the Army, Chief of Staff of the Army, Sergeant Major of the Army, published an Army Space Vision. What the vision does is it tasks Army Space to look at two things: integrating space capabilities and interdicting adversary use of space for hostile purposes. This is a really important document following the establishment of U.S. Space Force on what the next chapter of Army Space is. When we look at integrating in the integration realm, there's a couple things that we're doing. This year, we started the fielding for mounted and dismounted assured PNT receivers, and in FY25, we're going to scale that across the Army, giving the most capable, most reliant PNT receivers the force has seen. On the intelligence side, we're moving out with Titan, a tactical node that's going to give us access to space-based capabilities and help support the warfighter at the tactical edge. Really important capability. When we look at SATCOM, the Army's investing in hybrid terminals and multi-orbit modems. We're making tremendous strides in the RDT&E and being able to access multiple SATCOM in orbital regimes and making sure that we have at the warfighter reliable SATCOM. On the interdiction side, we're looking at developing capabilities to protect our friendly forces and deny adversary use of space for hostile purposes. We're also working on a counter C5 ISRT portfolio. In April of this year, the DepSecDef drafted a memo to bring three portfolios together: space, cyberspace, and electronic warfare. Those three portfolios combined, there's a lot of efficiencies when we start to see teaming with those three portfolios. The Army established an electronic warfare board of directors at the 3-star level at the headquarters to get after this, making sure that we complement one another. We have capabilities of support and are mutually reinforcing. That's a big part on the governance structure. The last part, and I think it's really important, is focusing on functions of the armed forces. It's really important. Since the establishment of Space Force, what is the Army's role? And it's really critical for the Army to dominate on the land domain, to integrate multi-domain effects and multi-domain capabilities. Again, whether you're looking at it through a counter C5 ISRT lens, whether you're looking at it from an integration standpoint, integrating some of the capabilities, whether it's PNT, SATCOM, ISR, missile warning, make sure that the warriors at the tactical edge have access to those capabilities. So when we look at the functions of the armed forces, we want to make sure that the Army continues to invest in things, in capabilities and formations that allow us to do our job. There's been some pretty big changes this year in force structure. The Secretary of the Army released an Army structural memorandum that's going to grow Army space formations. We're going to have 9 companies and 27 platoons that are going to focus on space warfighting. They're going to focus on capabilities at the tactical edge, supporting our ground forces, integrating at all levels. And it's really important to see that distinction and growth. I think that's going to be a critical capability for the Army as we dominate on the land domain and making sure that we have capabilities to protect ourselves, protect our friendly forces, and make sure that we can deny adversary use of space for those hostile purposes and make sure we retain an advantage. Those formations will be in the multi-domain task forces, the Theater Strike Effects Group, and the 1st Space Brigade. Those critical capabilities will make sure that we can retain our tactical edge today and for the foreseeable future. Again, thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to your questions.
Operator, headspace and timing. Thanks, sir. Good morning. I'm Colonel Don Brooks. I'm the Commandant of the Space and Missile Defense Schoolhouse out of Colorado Springs, Colorado. So as General Gainey and Colonel Atkinson discussed, the Army requires space professionals with advanced specialized training and experience. And as the Space Vision articulates, space capabilities start and end on the ground and are important in planning and operations, as Army space professionals are critical to Army preparedness, to set theaters, support deterrence, and enable successful operations. As you see on the slide before you, the new FM30 battle space geometry, Army space is land-centric. providing scalable, mobile, expeditionary, and forward-postured forces in contested and austere environments that are able to keep pace with maneuver forces in support of large-scale combat operations in the multi-domain environment. At the depth, breadth, and scale at Echelon, we, as Pete articulated earlier, integrate on-orbit and high-altitude capabilities to provide effects through the air and space domains and interdict adversary space and high-altitude capabilities in support of land and joint operations, making the Army more lethal and increasing our deterrent effect against our adversaries. Army space is growing, and to meet the approved force structure requirements, Space and Missile Defense Command is aggressively pursuing the creation of an Army Space Operations Enlisted MOS and an Army Space Operations branch consisting of that enlisted cohort, the functional area of 40 officers that we currently have in the Army today, and, if necessary, a warrant officer cohort as well. These soldiers conduct highly specialized missions such as missile warning, space situational awareness, missile defense, space electronic warfare, space control planning and targeting, and space support to operations along with other compartmented missions. Training and maintaining space professionals steeped in ground maneuver operations and experience provides the Joint Force the best path for identifying and refining requirements for space capabilities and is the most effective and efficient way to integrate space across all warfighting functions at the depth, breadth, and scale required across the Army. Speaking of Army formations, as Pete articulated earlier, we'll continue to grow across the Theater Strike Effects Group, the Multi-Domain Task Forces, the 1st Space Brigade, and you'll hear more about from Sergeant Major Tucker here shortly, along with SMDC's missile defense units such as the 100th Ground-Based Missile Defense Brigade and the Missile Defense Batteries. These organizations consist of various units of action, space control companies, Army space support companies, missile defense batteries, missile defense service batteries, and forward-based mode batteries, to name a few. With the change of our Army force structure and the speed of change necessary in today's and the future fight, we do relook how we generate our forces. As such, our current resourcing model doesn't allow us to grow and maintain experienced space professionals, which ultimately impacts readiness, as General Gainey articulated earlier. Within the last 25 years, we've maintained a very talented functional area of 40 space operations officers, and we borrow enlisted soldiers from varying military occupational specialties or branches. And then we also have a highly certified and qualified civilian workforce to develop and deliver these capabilities. But as articulated earlier, the increasing dependency on space capabilities of the Army of the future, we realize that this is not enough, and it's insufficient. So this temporary space soldier, as the boss talked about earlier, has proven not able or capable to meet current and future operational demands and negatively impacts our ability to sufficiently answer the call in today's operational environment. So we're not only transforming our force structure from a personnel perspective, but we're also integrating various lessons learned to operationally test weapons, to integrate or enable our integration and interdiction missions. We are conducting experimentation to integrate light, agile, expeditionary equipment sets to support large-scale combat operations, enabling the Army to close with and destroy our adversaries. Like our field artillery counterparts, we're fielding systems that range from large, more stationary in a sense, to tactical form factors that can maneuver on the battlefield alongside an infantry platoon, for example. We are integrating high-altitude platforms with the ability to reconstitute, augment, and surge space effects if and when our adversary interferes with our freedom of access and movement maneuver in the space domain. Our high-altitude capabilities will allow deep sensing in support of long-range precision fires, enable navigation warfare, provide network extension via voice and data, enable assured PNT or position navigation and timing, and have both lethal and non-lethal payloads. We'll have multi-form factor balloons operating at various altitudes, executing different mission sets, ultimately increasing the target problem set dilemma for our adversaries, which directly supports the Army and DoD's resiliency efforts and makes us more lethal. In closing, the improved force structure, the evolving threats, the current and future weapon systems, Platforms and persistent global requirements have created a dilemma or a demand for the Army to conduct effective and successful operations across the space domain. We need an Army Space Operations career field and branch to produce and sustain the specialized, highly experienced, and talented non-commissioned officer corps and officer cohort capable of integrating space across all warfighting functions and converging effects in support of maneuver operations. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time, and I look forward to our discussion.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being out here. I'm Command Sergeant Major Tucker. Along with Colonel Mark Kobos, we are the command team for the 1st Space Brigade. What I'd like to talk about today is you just heard the how and the what that we do. I want to focus on the who. Who are the personnel that are doing this? Now, you think Army Space, you would assume, hey, sitting in a nice building behind a computer. But my personnel are forward in the fight. We are composed of all compos. We got 1st Space Battalion, which is my active duty battalion, my 2nd Space Battalion, which is of my Army Reserve, and we train and certify the Colorado National Guard to do space operations. With that, our primary focus on top of building this exquisite space capability is building soldiers, all right? Focus on the fundamentals of soldiering. Shoot, move, communicate, and medicate. Within our organization, we've got soldiers participating in the Expert Soldier Badge out there on Fort Carson, partnering with the 4th Infantry Division. We've got soldiers going to airborne and air assault school. Recently, during an operation, we had a space soldier, conduct a tandem halo jump with 10th Special Forces Group at NTC to provide interdiction operations supporting them during their rotation. So we are your boots in the dirt when it comes to Army space. All right, we are focused on the fundamentals of training and development. As was discussed before, we are made up of different MOSs, primarily air defense, intelligence, and signal. Outside of building that exquisite space capability, we're also focused on the development of those officers, non-commissioned officers, and warrant officers in the fundamentals of their MOS. So when they do rotate back to their branch, they are just as capable of performing their MOS functions as they are doing their space functions. All of that to say, we are your Army Space Brigade. We are the only Army Space Brigade. Thank you.
Whoa, Sergeant Major. That was great. That was great. Okay. So now's the fun time, the time we really want to get into the Warriors Corner, and that's your questions. Wow, I didn't even, okay, let's jump right into it.
Hi, I'm Teresa Hitchens with Breaking Defense. Thank you for doing this, and nice to see you all. My question is about your SATCOM pilot program, which you just wrapped up with Intelsat and SES. Could you please elaborate on what comes next? And that was the end of the year-long pilot. Was it successful, and where do you go from here? Thank you.
So I'll jump on that. We're focusing on the capability development for that. So we have a different section working the actual pilot program. From what I've learned, it was absolutely a success on learning what the Army requirement needs are for next generation SATCOM and how to access that. We took the information from the pilot and then we scaled that to some of the next generation tactical terminals. And so what we did is we took that pilot, we took the lessons learned, and my team, in the team within the G3, looked at how do we codify that as a requirement. So that was the main focus for us on that pilot program. And then we're looking at SATCOM as a managed service and how we leverage that. But really close collaboration with the G6 and our teammates that work the broader SATCOM portfolio. Thanks, Teresa.
Hey, thank you. Patrick Tucker from Defense One. So out of Ukraine, we're discovering that commercial satellite capabilities like Starlink, and of course there's a military version of that that's not commercial, but Starlink is being utilized by Ukrainian forces and also by adversarial Russian forces. So can you speak a little bit to the future operational environment and the possibility of adversarial use illicit of U.S. commercial space communications?
I will take a stab. We recognize that our adversaries are going to take advantage of what's accessible. So it's really difficult to discern between who can use what, where, and why. So a lot of reporting on illicit use. And so within our G2 teammates, they work hard to make sure that we collaborate with the different organizations out there to prevent that misuse. And again, it's really difficult and largely a problem that our intelligence community will address, not as much on the space side, but we recognize that use of Starlink for illicit purposes is something to work with, and I would probably pass that more along the lines of how U.S. Space Command collaborates with the international community and partners in making sure that we don't see rise in illicit use and through their commercial integration cell, bringing in some of those key partners that provide space services for the U.S. military, our partners and our allies, and how to curb any illicit use.
Hi, this is Sandra Irwin with Space News. Question for Sergeant Major Tucker. You talked about all the activities that the soldiers from this 1st Army Space Brigade perform. Do you do anything directly with the Space Force? Do you work together at all with them? I mean, how do you all decide, what is a priority for the Army that is maybe not so much a priority for the Space Force? Thanks.
Yeah, awesome question. So we partner a lot with the Space Force because we have a lot of light capabilities, and it's about information sharing. I mean, the concept that we believe in is one team. So we're not trying to replace what Space Force does, but replicate and reinforce. As I stated, our primary focus is to go forward into the theater to provide a lot of that, but a lot of what we do is through those co-partnerships, information sharing, especially on the intelligence side, system understanding, and building those partnerships. So we do partner a lot. Right now we're working with the different DELs throughout the Space Force to see, what capabilities they have, what we have, and how we complement that. Because at the end of the day, it's one team to provide for the warfighter in the theater.
But not only on the operational side, but also on the institutional side, we do have a partnership with the Space Force. And routinely, our space officers from the Army do attend Space Force education courses, and then on the flip side, they come to ours as well. We're partnered very well. We're very complementary to each other and how we fight across the tactical, operational, and strategic levels of warfare on the operational side and the institutional side as well.
And just adding on the strategic side, the headquarters, we partner really closely with Space Force as a partner on the Joint Requirements Oversight Council, the Joint Space Requirements Integration Cell. Everything we do is in partnership with Space Force as we look at capabilities, future growth, and we want to make sure that all of the efforts on the Army space are complementary. So we're making sure to reduce any redundancy, duplicative efforts, and that's been a major focus through the requirements process that our vice chiefs and our service leadership attend to make sure that we, as we move forward, we're doing that collaboratively. And that's one of the main efforts that we see through joint partnerships, and we recognize space is inherently joint, making sure that, again, we add to, we don't take away.
And also I highlighted earlier as an assigned force to SpaceCom, that's where the fusion occurs, as SpaceCom leverages and synchronizes all of the forces' space capabilities. There's also synergy in that area also.
Morning, Sergeant Major, gentlemen. Colonel Dexter Nunley, I'm the Chief of Staff for the Command and Control cross-functional team. My question is pertaining to tactical edge. Space is inherently a strategic environment. I've heard you all talk about at echelon to the tactical edge. We're talking about tactical edge for certain capabilities as well, but no one has really defined or gotten on the same use the same term of reference when we talk about tactical edge. But Sergeant Major talked about capabilities down on the ground with platoon. So from your perspective, what are your requirements for those capabilities you will be pushing down to these platoons in order for you to share that data and then push it back up to where it may need to go for the commander?
I'll go ahead and jump on it first. So tactical edge is not a doctrinal term. Tactical edge is a description. That's where the rubber meets the road for warriors, whether it's hand grenade range, small arms fire range, indirect fire range. What we want to make sure is that the warfighter has access to these capabilities. While some of the capabilities may be strategic in nature, the information they provide may not be. How do we get that information? Timely PNT, all of the things we want from SATCOM, from the ISR satellites. How do we get that information to the warrior who needs it most? Those are the individuals closest to where our adversary is. Those are the individuals, and you look at different regions of the world where that conflict is happening. How do we get them that crucial information that a landline, that ground terrestrial communications can't provide them, and they need to have space-based communications. So really, when we look at what the tactical edge is, it's getting that critical space mission area in the hands of the warriors, in hands of the operators that need it most. And there's a wide range of those close combat formations that are out there, and that's really the beauty of getting it to them. And they may be a strategic capability, but we want to make sure that that information that it's providing is tactically relevant.
Chief, first name? Dexter, great question. I would say providing tactical effects to tactical commanders. Understand space is strategic in nature, but I would argue it is very tactical for things that we need to apply space to do. So if it's putting a 60-millimeter mortar on someone, I can do that. If it's generating a tactical level effect with a space capability that's integrated with a platoon that might be shooting in direct support of a different formation across the battle space, that's exactly what we're looking for and exactly the things that we can do and deliver. You talked about comms and the infrastructure in the C2 piece. There's an incredible requirement for backhauling information. So as we have forward observers out who are looking at the electromagnetic spectrum and conducting reconnaissance, as they're seeing and assessing our effects on an adversary, how do we backhaul that data to a different, so if they're a sensor, how do we backhaul it to a shooter? And then as far as the command and control of all of those capabilities together, generating effects simultaneously and in tandem with each other. Because we're so limited, if I have two capabilities generating the same effect on the same target, in my account, that's fratricide. We are so few across the battle space, I gotta be the most effective and efficient way to deliver effects, and I need a C2 system to do that, and today we don't have that. But we're looking to gain that capability.
Thank you, gentlemen. This was a great session. My question, myself, Ash Banerjee from the Bright Group, and the question is about generally leveraging data centricity for the various Army objectives, mission objectives, as well as other tasks. Kind of builds up on the question that was asked before. How does the command differentiate between data that's being collected for strategic initiatives versus the tactical initiatives? They are both different, and they require different kind of work, both from a data management point of view as well as leveraging analytics, AI, ML, and things like that for both of those areas. The Missile Defense Agency, which is another agency that's kind of like doing some of the missile defense activities, they actually have realized some of the gaps that exist in their data management, data governance, analytics, and they have reached out to the industry to ask for some feedback as to how they can advance those things. So my question to you is, where does your command stand in that? Oh, hello.
Sir, I would, another great question. As far as we are heavily reliant on data and heavily reliant on our intelligence community to do the correct PED of that information that we are not collecting, because we're not collectors. We record information across the environment. I would argue the intelligence community does the collection or the processing of that data once we deliver it to them. Because the data is so enormous, we definitely need AI/ML to get to the point where we can generate timely effects, call it relative effects at the speed of relevancy, at the timing, tempo, and pace that maneuver requires. Today, we're not there. We are focused on getting to that point where as soon as we see something or a sensor detects an adversary target that's one of our target lists, or that is on our target list that we're authorized to engage, we sense it, we can shoot it to deny, degrade, or disrupt their ability to use that particular space-based capability for their advantage.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, Major J.J. Morgan, Army 10 Cap. Traditionally, as we've developed space capabilities, specifically offensive and defensive capabilities, they are rightly very siloed, kept very compartmentalized to ensure that they're protected. As we move forward and we look at how Army space specifically can support not just the ground domain, but can support a combined, an allied, a partnered capability, how do we think about sharing capability information? How do we think about supporting the ground force commander or even other component commanders with Army space capabilities. And back to the network piece, how do we tie that into some of these concepts like Next Gen C2 and CJAD C2 as a concept?
So we're currently in a rewrite of our security classification guide to open up the aperture, but I would argue as we're developing capabilities, we need to do a better assessment. Is it state of the art versus state of the world? I would say that there's a lot of things that come out and we're developing that are state of the world, but we put way too tight restrictions on that security classification, and then we ignore our partners. And as we all understand, space is inherently joint, multinational, and a commercial enterprise. And we've got to figure out ways that we can more effectively and efficiently integrate our entire partners, the entire suite of partners, to a problem set. And so we are currently at Space and Missile Defense Command going through a rewrite of our security classification guide of Army systems. But I would also argue that it's an entire community working together to make sure we're writing the correct classification guide and taking into account state of the art versus state of the world.
Zach Rosenberg, Janes. Speaking of multinational, space is inherently multinational. Can you discuss your interaction with other forces, external foreign forces? How does SMDC intend to take advantage of allied capabilities, and how do we intend to integrate these capabilities into allied forces if that's something they're called upon to do?
So a combination between the institutional side and the operational side to answer your question, sir. Institutionally, we have been forming a partnership with the UK Space Academy and also the UK Army as we look to move together in tandem to begin that process. And so next summer, we're looking to begin an exchange program between a UK space officer to come to my schoolhouse and be one of my instructors, and we look to do the same from the Army space community over to the UK to begin that joint endeavor. I would say the Australians and New Zealanders aren't far behind, as we've been having discussions with them as well. And I would say it's a fledgling relationship, but it's one that we're moving quite fast to bring to fruition.
As Colonel Brooks stated, as we build that partnership with the UK, they have personnel that come to us. We've ourselves gone over to the UK and discussed with them, one, just some of the TTPs, because they have like equipment that we have. So we talk about those TTPs, employment opportunities, employment processes, and how they can employ their systems, much like how we utilize ours, so that we're building that common space understanding with our partner and ally forces so that, as stated, we can operate together in the joint force, if you will, in accomplishing our tasks.
I'll add one last piece. We mentioned, about the security classification before. One of the critical components to bring in more allies and partners on board is to reduce that classification and expand it to include and make sure. So when we look at reducing or lowering the classification for some of the systems, we're also thinking about our allies and partners, making sure that we can, from the start, make sure that they're part of the plan as we can build that. So that's a major piece as far as how we can better collaborate as we lower the classification. We also include our allies and partners from the outset.
And sir, I'll ask for one alibi. And so within the schoolhouse, we actually have, I teach 21 different courses, or my instructors teach 21 different courses across space operations, global missile defense. Several of my courses are already joint certified and 5I certified to begin that international and joint partnership within the Army Space and Missile Defense Schoolhouse.
Hi, Michaela Easley with Defense Scoop. Thanks for your time today. You all have one Theater Strike Effects group in Indo-PACOM. Can you just talk about some of the initial lessons learned, observations about what that group is doing and how it's integrating with the rest of the force, and any plans for scaling that to other AORs or within Indo-PACOM?
Yeah, I'll start with there. So first of all, that formation is not fielded in Indo-PACOM yet. It will be at a future date, 27 timeframe. Right now, though, we are sending that formation out under the Commandant and our CDIT to integrate into exercise and capture lessons learned. So when we do actually field it into Indo-PACOM, we'll have a significant amount of data. But Don Brooks recently supported an exercise, and Don, if you have any overarching data points, you can provide that.
Thanks for this opportunity, sir. And ma'am, what we learned in JWA 24 in UCOM, working alongside of the 2nd MDTF and Colonel Pat Moffett standing behind you there, the commander of the MDTF, along with General Rafferty, the 56th Theater Fires Commander. We learned a great deal about the capacity that we can build with, in the multi-domain task force, they've got a space control electronic warfare company. And we've learned with this exercise that the TSEG can build onto that capacity, but also bringing additional capabilities to bear against our adversary. And so one of the great things with the TSEG is the counter surveillance reconnaissance capabilities that are bringing navigation warfare along with high altitude assets that it can bring to that fight. And it really does build that not only capacity, but build additional capabilities to shape and influence and really get to where we felt in JWA 24, we could see how we could generate convergence to open up windows of opportunity against our adversary, disintegrate their warfighting systems from each other to make them less effective and efficient, and to make us more effective and efficient to close with and destroy our adversary. It was a great exercise, and we've taken away a lot, and we're applying it not only to that campaign of learning into Indo-PACOM, but I think we'll see the same with UCOM in short order.
I think we're down to our last question, if we have one more question. Okay, no questions. We'll go to closing comments. I'll start with Sergeant Major. Any last comments?
Appreciate you guys hearing us, and understand Army 1st Space Brigade is here to support the warfighter. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for your time and questions and conversation. I would say, once again, Army Space is very complementary to the Space Force and to the other services' space capabilities and their efforts in the space domain. We all seek to do the same thing, generate timely effects at the timing, tempo, and pace of maneuver to ensure our warfighters, our ground combat commanders, are more effective and efficient in their ability to shoot, move, and communicate. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for this incredible opportunity. Just to reinforce what Don had mentioned, when you look at Army Space, it's where the rubber meets the road. It's providing our warfighters at the tactical edge capabilities that they could not have without space capabilities. That's why I became a space operations officer, and it's critically important. So we never lose sight of why we're doing Army Space, is to make sure we have a marked advantage today and for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Okay, in closing, I'd just like to highlight again, it's an honor to be the commander of Space and Missile Defense Command, and here today representing the several civilians, soldiers, non-commissioned officers, and officers of this great command. When you hear the Chief of Staff of the Army and the Secretary of the Army talk transform and contact, I'm very fortunate to do that on both sides of the house. Talked a lot this week on the missile defense side, but if you look on the Army Space side, we are doing that today. We have a program of record that we're fielding across the force, but we're also continue to innovate through our tech center and our center of excellence and our ACM to get prototypes out to the warfighter to test, evaluate, and provide feedback so we can get the right capability out to the warfighter. So in closing, the time is now. We have the vision, we have the leadership, and we have the capability and the infrastructure to move fast within space. So we will seize the opportunity. The Army is seizing the opportunity to get after what we need to do to be successful in an MDO fight. So thank you and appreciate your time.